The St. Clair Bassmaster Open starts today. Taku Ito gets his second Elite Series win, and we are headed north from here on out for our Bassmaster season. That and more on episode 182 of the Inside Bassmaster Podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Ronnie Moore. My co-host, like always, Kyle Jessie. And Kyle, looks like you're not at Lake St. Clair, which means you have the ability to watch everything go down from afar, just like myself, before we do Bassmaster Live on Saturday. And what an open it should be coming up this week. We'll get into that a little bit before we get into the Smith Lake talk from last Elite event.
What a treat the open season has been this year as it is, being live every final day of the event. You and I have talked about it. I haven't gone to as many opens this year as I have in past years, which, there's negatives too, of course, not being around, but also like being able to watch live every Saturday morning in the living room has been really, really fun. And I look forward to it this week as well. Should be some really good action there at St. Clair.
Yeah, we've got 6 days of Bassmaster Live left in the open season. We've got one at St. Clair, one at Leech, one at Mississippi River, and then 3 at Hartwell to end the year. We'll be able to see, cameras in the boats of some of our top competitors to qualify for the Elite Series, and it's the last-ditch effort at Hartwell to make the Classic for people. So it should be a great end of the open season. It's weird. The opens were ahead. We had 2 opens before we had an Elite Series event, and we've had more elites than opens because of the way they're spaced out, one per month the rest of the year over the 4-month stretch from Eufaula, St. Clair, or over the last 5 events: Eufaula, St. Clair, Leech next month, Mississippi River in September, and then October Hartwell. So I'm excited for the open, especially because we know how Lake St. Clair changes so much. It stays the same, but the places that it's won in are different. We've seen it won in Erie. We've seen it won in Huron. We've seen it won in Canada in St. Clair, the U.S. in St. Clair. We've seen out in front of Metro. We've seen Anchor Bay. We've seen the Rivers factor for sure. So it'll be interesting to see how the top 10, especially in a 225 boat field, divvy up the playing field to find their place. And the big ones always are there showing up. It used to be you'd leave St. Clair to win. So you'd have to go to Huron, you'd have to go on a river, you'd have to go to Erie, and then it turned tide where if you leave St. Clair, you're not going to win. You're not going to have a chance to win. Something's going to happen with weather, mechanical, or the amount of good fish in St. Clair are just present that while you're running an hour, guys are catching. So we'll see how it goes. Like we said, we're shooting this the morning St. Clair starts, so you can check out Bass Track and look it up. Everything right now. I highly suggest, and I'm going to promote this right now. Take a look at Mike Suchan's story, Such's story on Bassmaster.com. If you go over, it's under the St. Clair page, but it's obvious. It's also in the trending. If you're looking at the homepage, go to trending, the daily limit, the EQ nuts and bolts for the St. Clair Open. I will have it, I believe, linked above in the card, right above my head, right there right now. Okay, boom, it's there on YouTube. So click it and watch it. If not, go to the website and see Sucha's story. He really breaks down the points race in depth on what guys have done, how it projects to last year, which we had a couple more EQ competitors for the whole season, and then how it's looking for former elites trying to come back. You've got classic champs not in the EQ race, but are fishing, hoping probably for a Legends exemption. We know your sneaky ways. We know the phone calls being made behind the scenes. So we have a lot of different people playing the games this week at St. Clair, but should be a really good one. 6th event of the year, 3 more left after this.
Yeah, no doubt. It's certainly getting to that point of the season. I'll compare it to the baseball season. Obviously, the Major League Baseball season is super long, but you kind of get to the point in the season where, you can't afford to keep losing. And in the
Yeah,
sense of
your
of
Rangers got to figure it out.
correct. Yeah, I'm using that as an example because that's exactly where my Rangers are currently sitting. They're not out of it by any means, but it's like things start to get elevated, and the EQ season right now is the same exact thing with just a few events left. You look at your resume as an angler and you think, depending on where you're at in points, if you're near the top, you're like, I just got to keep the pace. But if I'm one of those guys that's on the fringe of even having a chance, it gets elevated so much more, every day of competition from here on out because you can't afford to have those mistakes. Like you've already had theoretically during the season, the mistakes that you can justify or you can, come back from. But now's the time you got to do it. And like I said, there's a lot of comparisons with that, and same in any sport, obviously. But certainly an exciting time, and we're starting to see some things get lined out, and obviously throughout the rest of the season, we'll continue to see that.
And the one thing I'll say, and you can speak to this as well, the war of attrition in the opens always takes place around here, this point in the season. When you get halfway, if you're not in the points race, you start to fall off. Maybe you only have one left in your division, when it was just a 3 event deal, and you end up bowing out. So the fields get smaller at the end of the year. Not so fast, with Division Three being St. Clair, Leech Lake, and Mississippi River. In fact, that is the most full division we have this year. It's a change of pace. Normally, the Northerns, what we would call the Northerns, maybe the Northerns and Centrals, those are the least occupied, and the Southerns are always the most filled. But with two in the Wisconsin Minnesota region, the locals have shown up. We have a huge contingent of Midwest anglers fishing the opens there. So Kyle, the big deal is for these EQ pros who maybe you start to get a little bit more to yourself. You get the competitors at the last couple opens. It's like, hey, these are the guys I've seen all year, because the local who fishes his home lake in the first stop doesn't win and just bows out. This is going to be different, because you could have 6 to 10 to 15 single division anglers in between, like one EQ angler to another. So the points line out the same, but let's just say in past years, if you cut that in half, you'd only have a few people in between, at most in between EQ anglers in the points race. So instead of you getting 10th place in the tournament and me getting 13th, I may be getting 20th. And so that points, and when we look at the EQ race, 10 points per spot, that could move you quite a bit. So some of these single division anglers are going to cause some chaos just by their presence being there, and the points that they may steal from fishing in their backyard. So we'll keep an eye on that, and it's good to see the field full this late in the year, especially and the renewed energy of the Upper Midwest, which has put out so many elite pros lately. So I like to see this. And I think it'll be good. I believe we have Joey Cifuentes coming in, who won at St. Clair last year, doing something different than everyone else. So ideally, we have a lot of things going on, but if it is one of those deals where majority of anglers are in one region, Joey can speak to the fear of maybe being an outlier, the guy who all 9 other anglers stop in Anchor Bay and you have to keep running for 25 minutes, 30 minutes. That was probably an eerie feeling, for lack of a better term. But the trophy feels good too. So we'll talk with him all day on Bassmaster Live.
Yeah, that should be an exciting conversation, and it's something we talked about a little bit earlier was with the layout of anglers last year at the Elite Series tournament. You had so many anglers, and coming from my perspective, we were thrilled about it. That fished relatively close to takeoff. I mean, it wasn't not super far runs, and there was a lot of anglers congregated in one simple area. And that's relative as well. When you're talking about these giant bodies of water, one general area is like I can barely see a guy like off in the distance, but
Yeah.
for the most
Anchor
part,
Bay
it
is
was
like,
one.
what is it, 10,
Yes,
10 miles, 15 miles long at the longest point from point to point. But yeah.
absolutely. And then like you said, with Joey running a little bit further, with not that he was completely by himself, but I mean had that general area more to himself than a lot of the other guys, and you saw how that played out. So especially with the larger field size in the opens, there's going to be a lot to pay attention to. And I've already kind of been paying attention a little bit this morning to the map that we have access to see where all the guys on Bass Track are at, and pretty interesting to see the spread out. And as we're doing this, I can't keep my eyes off my computer because I'm seeing all the jumps on Bass Track, and makes me excited because there's so much to follow. All the guys that are in it, to stay in it, all the guys that are on the outside, and that's one of the cool things. Also, we all know Bass Track is tentative, a projection, of course, of what the end of the day will be, especially
Very
when.
small little puzzle, a little piece of the pie.
Sure. But you start seeing, the EQ rank on the far end of Bass Track, and you see how much each catch, theoretically, again, moves each guy in the EQ points. And to me, that's so much fun to follow because you're like, oh man, I got jumped from, where he was in the 20s to now in the top 10. So like that's really it's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on. And like I said, if I'm veering off to my left, that's why I'm keeping an eye on it myself.
Well, as we're shooting this podcast, we have 34 anglers, 15 pounds and up. I didn't know any limits below 15 pounds existed in St. Clair, but they're just getting their day started. It is an early start for them compared to other tournaments because they are so far north, and the time change deal. Normally, we're hitting the northern swing at the end of the month or middle of August, and so it's different time zone deals. But I remember being in Michigan, the upper part of Michigan, in July, and it's 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. It's daylight. It is all day. It is you close your eyes and actually it's those tournaments are very difficult because you have so long to be able to fish, but also so little time to charge in the evenings. And so if you're working on it in weather all day long, burning your midnight oil on your trolling motor batteries or electronics, whatever, the first thing you do is you don't go get some dinner on the way back from the ramp. You go to the house, plug it up, and then go dilly dally and eat. Because if you waste 2 or 3 hours eating, that's 2 or 3 hours you're not getting charged. But yeah, 34 anglers over 15 pounds right now. And that brings me, before we move on, we're kind of doing this backwards. We're doing a little St. Clair talk and then Smith instead of recapping our last event. But I wanted to kind of, this is what's on the forefront. We can talk about Smith till we're blue in the face, but folks who are watching, you need to realize the Open's going on. Keep an eye on that to see where the next crop of guys are going to be. It says right now, Dakota Eber, because he's got a couple more pounds than Easton, like you said, Kyle, the EQ jumps. He is now your new points leader on Bass Track unofficially. As soon as the other 140 anglers populate some kind of weight at the weigh-in and get points, there's going to be a lot of weird jumps where this guy, how is he out of the points? Well, because he has zero, and you don't get points for catching zero. So once they make their jumps, it'll be better. So before we get into the Smith talk, I gotta bring up today's B&W Trailer Hitchers question of the day. Okay, so the question of the day, Kyle, is over the 3 days of the Open at St. Clair, we've got roughly 225 anglers, a full field, at least 215 anglers. There's always some who drop off at the last second, but let's just say we've got over 215 anglers. That's going to be in that 450, 460 for the 3 days, 225, roughly 225, and then 10. So roughly 450 possible bags weighed in from the boater side. My question of the day, the B&W Trailer Hitchers question of the day is how many of those 450 are going to be 20-pound bags? How many 20-pound bags will we see at St. Clair for the 3 days of the tournament? And while you ponder on that, because I just popped it on you, let's thank B&W for being a part of the podcast. So today's episode is brought to you by B&W Trailer Hitchers. If you're in need of a reliable hitch, look no further than the Tow and Stow adjustable ball mount. Heavy duty, adjustable in height, multiple ball options. It even stows right behind your bumper when it's not in use. This hitch is a game changer, and with B&W's lifetime warranty, you're getting the quality that you can trust. And if it does fail, they've got your back. So whether you're hauling your boat, hitting the road with your RV, towing a trailer, doing some work around the yard, you can be covered and equipped by B&W Trailer Hitches. Head to their website today and find the right trailer hitch for you. So Kyle, I'll repeat it. How many 20-pound bags over the 3 days of the Open, 450 or 460 opportunities, will we see? And if you're still pondering on it, I can jump in and give my thoughts first. I always make you go first, so I'll give you the option. If you want to go first, be my guest. If you want to throw it on me, I'll put myself out there to be wrong first.
I know we always have anglers on and we ask them questions like this and they always hate it. And now I understand it why, because I think at Smith Lake I suggested it was going to take 115 pounds to win, and it didn't take quite that much. Sarcastically, of course, I suggested it was going to be way more than I even thought it was. But to answer your question, I can't decide if I want to go low or high, because last time I went high in preparation for thinking it would be better than it was, and it wasn't. and mostly I go low. So I'm going to say somewhere in the 25 to 30 20-pound bags a day.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll start out at a base of 50.
Over 2 days, yeah.
Yeah,
50
over the
something.
first 2 days, we'll say 54. 54 over the first 2 days. And then the final day, those guys are going to be on them. I'll say there's going to be, I'll say 6 of the 10 are over 20 on the final day because you also have guys that kind of tailor off towards
For
the end of
sure.
the tournament too. Fish kind of go away from them. They ran through, what they had. So I'm going to go an even 60, 60 20-pound bags over the course of 3 days.
I like that. Yeah, and one thing we should note with this is that today's weather is the worst weather we're going to have. So it's going to get better tomorrow. Better meaning easier to navigate, probably easier to stay on the trolling motor, be able to fish, see your fish on your graph, stuff like that. So because yeah, the hurricane that hit Houston, I mean, I've gotten reports from every corner of the country, it seems. The hurricane that hit Houston hit Little Rock when I flew out Monday for a trip. Somehow it hit the St. Lawrence yesterday, and the last day and a half it's hit St. Clair. How is it everywhere at the same time? This is a huge storm. And so yeah, they felt the effects of it yesterday. If you saw Randall Tharp's Instagram story, it was blowing. Um and that was just an Anchor Bay, but we know how wind direction is key. So with the weather getting a little bit more stable and better, I'd say we're gonna see some big bags today, but we may see more 20-pound bags tomorrow. I like that 60 that you're saying. I don't want to agree with you. The thought process is there for sure. I think that we see um I'll go a little lower. I'm gonna go 55. I think today a lot of guys took the day off yesterday, so they probably didn't pressure fish. Um, No, you know what? Screw. I'm gonna go high. I'm gonna go 65, not 55. I'll go 65. I'll go a little bit more than you. I still agree with that 6 to 7 on the final day. Do it. A couple won't. Um, I think today. I think today we're gonna have enough 20-pound bags to get us on the way there. Tomorrow we're gonna see a whole bunch of 20-pound bags. Like we're gonna see somebody come from 86th and get a check. Like we're gonna see some jumps. So I'll go 65. Final answer. Lock it in.
I like it.
And we can segue and say, boy, I was worried about my prediction because it was 4.7 and 4.9 and some largemouth mixed in at Smith for the big bass. But boy, Taku saved the day. A 5.12 spotted bass on the final day. And what was Ronnie's B&W Trailer Hitch's big bass of Smith going to be? A 5.10 spot, and it was a 5.12 spot. I was so close. That what a oh man, when he weighed it or when he caught it and they said 6-pounder, but it went in his bass drag as a 5.25. I was like, I could see it being somewhere in the middle there. And if it's going to be in the middle there, I wouldn't mind it being exactly in the middle and being 5.10. But 5.12 for Taku gave me the victory in the B&W Trailer Hitches bonus points segment of the day that we are not keeping track of until now since I won.
Yeah, and my suggestion I think was a 6 something because I thought a largemouth would be caught because it seems like it tends to happen, like it's not a super
Oh, yeah.
um
That outlier
consistent
giant.
pattern. But yeah, it seems like we almost always see somebody propel their weight one day with a big largemouth in tournaments similar to Smith, not necessarily Smith exclusively, but yeah, ended up certainly not being that way at all. As far as the big largemouth, there were certainly largemouth that were caught, but it didn't seem like there was any largemouth that really pushed for that,
Oh,
five
no
plus
doubt. Yeah.
pound range. So
I
yeah, that
think
was
that I think Hunter had a 4.7 on day one because he was the leader. And then I think day two, someone caught a 4.7 largemouth because it was like tied. And then Kiyoya caught a 4.9 spot on day three, which I believe is his new personal best in a tournament because he caught his personal best spot at Logan Martin in the Open. It was like 4.3 or 4.4. And so 4.9 for Kiyoya on day three. And then day four, Taku just, I mean, what a ridiculous circumstance with the storm that came through. And then He went and visited a place. He caught two 2-pounders earlier in the day and caught a freaking 5 12. So, um, with that being said, we can always come back and mention St. Clair again. I'll time code it in the description of the video if we do jump back in. But let's talk about Smith, man. What a fun event. I'll say this. I love the Elite Series pros. They were correct in terms of the lowest weight tournaments. These Alabama tournaments would be the lowest weight tournaments of the year. They were not correct in terms of how fun the tournaments were. Maybe not fun for them catching, but how fun they were on Bass Live with Wheeler and Smith playing out the way they did. Boy, and normally we have some kind of not issue, but like it's hard to get 4 feeds from electronics each day. We had 4 feeds from electronics each day, and we were able to see different guys, color palettes, the depth they were fishing, watching these fish come up and interact with their baits, missing fish, and it fires up the group, and a big one comes up and gets it. We got to see that aspect of the tournament go down, which is the huge thing. When it's deep, deep water and you're fishing above deep water, not on structure, just open water, uh, it's hard to quantify for the fans at home who don't know how to do that or haven't done that, what these guys are looking at, what they're fishing for. So showing that was huge. And then you had the top water blowups from Brian New, and you had top water from Hunter Shryock, and you had Steve Kennedy doing both patterns, going deep early, catching a limit, and then going wolf packing and catching a couple good ones each day on a glide bait until that petered out. Like, how awesome was that deal? And then, boy, the drama that came with Trey McKinney situation, showing up late and then finding out that he only was late because he got a heads up like, hey, you're late. What are you doing? And getting DQ'd for the day. Now he's second in points. Justin Hender's in the driver's seat. And that points race, instead of being a 60-something points race from first to second, it's now like 6 guys within 60 points. So these last 2 Northern events are going to be very interesting for the points race and how it goes down there. But Kyle, Smith was so fun. And as a spotted bass lover, like I mentioned before, it's what I grew up fishing at Lake Norman. I love spotted bass. Got the phone call that I was going to be able to get my job here probably when I was on Smith. So I love the Hartwells, Laniers, Normans, Smiths of the world. And I had a lot of fun covering that tournament.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that the tournament in general was both of them. Of course, we've talked about Wheeler, of course, a little bit already, but um, were so interesting for a variety of reasons. I mean, you look at Smith, exactly like you said, the Steve Kennedy action on the first couple of days was just mesmerizing. Of course, on day 2 where he was catching those giant spotted bass on a glide bait, obviously some of the more visually appealing catches we'll see all year. And you know how fun it is just to watch Steve Kennedy as it is because of how much fun he has catching those bass. But definitely an interesting tournament. I mean, you thought maybe through day 1, day 2, like things were what they were, if that makes sense. I mean, it's just kind of playing out pretty similarly to maybe how some people would have expected. But then, like you said, with the unfortunate circumstances that happened to Trey McKinney opening up the AOY race, it was far from being a non-dramatic tournament in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. For the AOY race, for the tournament itself, going into the final day with so many guys, I mean, basically everybody in the top 10 having a chance to win, like a realistic chance to win, just made it a really fascinating tournament to watch. And especially that final day. I mean, when you talk about Takumi Ito on those types of tournaments, and I guess, you know, when I compare it, the comparison I will make is when you take a springtime tournament. I've heard Davey Height say this about Jason Christie. Like, if Jason Christie has a chance to win in a springtime tournament, like, you kind of view him as the assassin. Like, that's the guy that could chase everybody down and really make something happen. Well, Taku's like the same exact thing in that style of tournament. Like, in a style of tournament, like a smallmouth event where the bass are more nomadic, or a spotted bass event where the fish are suspended fishing, offshore, of course. He's the guy you always have to keep an eye on. Like, he's kind of the assassin in that tournament style, which is really, really fascinating to watch. The final day, you knew that, like, he had such a great chance as it was. being just a little bit back of the leader to Robert G going into the final day. But it was really, really interesting to watch. And then it playing out the way it did with that giant spotted bass late in the day. I mean, it was dramatic as could be from a tournament standpoint. And watching on live, I got to do Bass Live Mix for the final 2 days, and then obviously got to do live with you for an hour each day, the first 2 days. So I got to watch what was going on way more than I get to when I'm on the water. Because, we've talked about it on the podcast before. When I'm shooting photos on the water, I only get to see a very narrow, percentage of what's
Scope, as
going
you would
on.
say.
100%. Right. No pun intended. But, you know, this tournament was not like that. And one thing that was interesting is so many guys that we had on Live Mix would see where Taku was fishing and say, I know exactly where he's at, and I could never get those fish to bite. Like I could not get him to bite. Clark Wendell, it was the first person we had on the Saturday morning, and he just had a big grin on his face over there, and I kind of noticed, and he was like, I noticed this spot in practice, and I practiced there. I fished not too far from there, but it's just crazy that he's able to get those fish to bite. And then through the course of Saturday and then Sunday as well, had multiple other guys say the same thing, which just goes to show you just how good Taku is in those style. Again, that style of tournament. Like he just figures out a way to get those fish to bite in non-traditional manners, if that's what you want to call it. I mean, obviously you can
Oh
see on
yeah,
bassmaster.com the top lures gallery, or the gallery that we just posted the other day with Taku's secret Japanese baits revealed.
I
I
think it's
mean, just
still in the features,
just
right? I think it's still
it
like
certainly is.
PS2.
Certainly is. Yep. And so interesting to watch him do what he does best in those style tournaments. And I just am fascinated by how good he is, again, in that style of tournament. So it was a great event. I thought obviously it was very warm. But also I said this a ton during live. Like we were also very fortunate because sometimes, this time of the year, of course, it's hot from start to finish. I mean, it's hot from the time you walk outside to the time you go to bed at night. Each morning was really manageable. It didn't start getting really, really warm until later in the day, like basically weigh-in time, which was, super nice from a standpoint of not just being overheated at all times. So absolutely a super fun tournament, and
They
definitely again in a tournament where a lot of people probably the optics were that it'd be boring, it'd be this, it'd be that. I thought it was a really fun tournament to cover and be a part of.
Especially because it was the closest tournament that we'll have most of the time, other than that final weight you see from Taku winning by 3 pounds or something. Like that's the only gap that was the largest gap anyone had all week, because it was just razor sharp. I mean, I think it was a 3 ounce deficit from first to third, um, going into the final day with Robert G, Taku, Jay Shakurit, and so kudos to Taku as well. Taku got better every day weight wise. Hard to do that in the summertime. We see it in the summer months, but it might be smallmouth. To see it done in a spotted bass middle of the summer in Alabama tournament was huge. 13-10, 13-11, 14-2, and then 16-9, the biggest bag of the tournament, biggest bass of the tournament, and wins the biggest prize of the tournament. He won by 4-1, not 3-1. So yeah, that 4.4 pound gap was just the difference in everyone on the final day catching 12.5 pounds, and he caught 16.5 pounds. That giant fish, he was probably going to win by half a pound. Um, but with that kicker, that zoomed it up there. Culling a 2 pound spotted bass with a almost 6 pound spotted bass is huge. And so Taku gets the win there. Robert G, man, showed out. Really, I feel, I told Robert this as well, like prior months. I feel real bad for the Wesley Gores and the Robert G's of the world. I didn't, I was, sir, I wasn't familiar with your abilities. Like what Shaq says when he says, when he like didn't know that guy in the rookie in the NBA, him at all. And he's like, I apologize. I was not familiar with your game. Well, I was not familiar with your guys' game because Robert G and Wesley Gore basically sat in no man's land. It was a good place to be, not at the top of the Opens EQ points race in terms of trying to fight for AOI, and not at risk of really getting cut and missing the cut. They were fourth and fifth and sixth the whole year. And so they were never at risk and never in the game at the top. They're kind of like in our AOY race, Kyle, at the end of the year. They're the people who are 15th to 26th in the elites. Those 11 guys, 12 guys, nobody mentions them because they can't win AOY and they really can't fall out of the classic cuts. So they're just like enjoying the smallmouth catches. But Robert G and Wesley Gore have shown so much to me, and I've learned so much from their game. Robert is so charismatic and funny. And Toledo Bend, it was great having him on there. He got a top 5 finish there. And then this week, or at this event at Smith, it was so fun to see him in the groove. And no, it's not, I'm going to go out here and fish over a group of bait over 80 feet of water and hope these spotted bass bite. It's, I'm going towards the deepest water in the lake, which is down by the dam. The 200 plus feet contours that you're going to see are down there because there are so many big striper around that the spotted bass that are small cannot live down there. They will not live down there, that I will catch better than average fish. And that's why you see he had at least 12 and a half pounds every single day. And prior to that, he had 13 and a half pounds every day. He had 13.7, 14, 14.2, and then he had 12 and a half. So something was different for him on that final day. He did go 2 hours in the morning without catching one, and then he started going. And so those fish had moved, and he had opted to go closer to the dam and start his, his catching spree. So kudos to him and the accuracy. Brother, we were talking about every time I log into social media, it's live scope, no skill. Oh, it's live scope, no skill. I saw a fish appear. He had 100 feet out on his graph. Fish appeared at 100 feet. By the time he opens his bail and casts, it's at 98 and a half feet away. And it lands at 98 and a half feet on its nose, drops in front of it, and he catches the fish. 98 feet, or he's just like, oh, it's over there. Boom, perfect. I mean, whether you don't like the style of fishing or not, the time it takes to get deadly accurate, like if you mess up the first cast, you're not catching the fish accurate, and you go over there and cast at it. Most people would see that fish and be like, I'm going to troll 20 more feet and get it within that 60 to 70 feet and then cast. And I'll probably be closer. 98 feet on the nose, get in the boat, 3-pounder. Awesome to see that. And Jay Shakurit, I mean, when's this kid going to suck? He's never going to suck. He's so good. Top 10 in the points race again, still. Corey Johnston, after falling down big time at Wheeler, jumped back in the race because of the incident and situation with Trey. I said the top 6 were within 60 points. Kyle, the top 10 are within 60 points. Wesley Gore is 64 points back in 10th. Still doable. And Corey's now back in the race there. Cooper Gallant with a great finish. Tyler Williams, I really want to I'll call out the rest of the top 10 so they all get mentioned, but Tyler Williams 5th, Cooper Gallant 6th, Kyle Patrick 7th, JT Tompkins 8th, Cody Huff 9th, and Justin Hamner 10th. Some things to be aware of. Hamner had a 2-pound penalty for having 6 fish. That would have given him 51 pounds, 10 ounces, and he would have finished 7th instead of 10th. So when we think about the points race, Kyle, that is 4 extra points that he would probably love to have. It's no big deal. You fell to 10th, but finishing 7th, catching enough weight to finish 7th, and you get 10th, that's a bummer. So we'll keep an eye on the points race with Hamner there. Cody Huff, third in points now because he fell down on the final day to 9th. He gave some points back to Trey, who is now in 2nd in the points race. Wanted to highlight JT Tompkins and Tyler Williams. They're the guys who weighed half of their fish, basically. Of their 20 fish, they were right at or a little bit better than 50% largemouth, which was very cool to see. I went back in my records and found some Champlain papers in my notebook where when it used to be largemouth, smallmouth, like Brian Schmidt won in 2021 at Champlain with 11 largemouth, 9 smallmouth. So I always like to see when there's a lake that can be won with both, how the top 10 measures out. And we had 6 guys exclusively catch all spots. We had Kyle Patrick and Justin Hamner who had um, 3 or 4 of their 20 be that. Going into the final day, they both had 2 largemouth of their 15, so they caught some more on the final day. And then we had JT and Tyler who caught majority largemouth or 50-50 largemouth. So those are some news, notes, and nuggets. Jay Shakurit, going to keep an eye on him. Let me see where he's at in the points race. I think he's like 6th or 7th. And I think that that's going to be, yeah, he's 7th place, and he is 46 points out. It's going to be hard to catch him. That many people within 46, but I'll say I wouldn't be surprised if somebody like Jay made that jump. Jay, Chris Johnston, Corey's in 9th. I mean, Cody Huff had a great northern swing last year. Jacob Fouts did as well. Justin Hamner did as well. So it'll be a great fight down to the bitter end at the St. Lawrence.
And I think you look at the St. Lawrence specifically, and really the two final northern tournaments in New York. And, when you look at it from a fantasy fishing perspective, there's a lot of anglers and a lot of things you consider to be like for sure things, when you go up north. Like there's a handful of guys that are going to catch them every time we go up there. Last year kind of proved that that's not necessarily the case anymore. Like a lot of these guys are figuring it out. You saw that with Patrick Walters last year. And then we've seen, a guy like Brandon Polinick last year really struggle up north, whereas, in the past, he's never struggled up there. So to suggest that, or that everything's dead set in stone and that these guys are going to be the one that catch them, I mean, we just don't know because that's the way it played out last year. And I would suspect that we'll certainly see more of that. I mean, you take it, whether it's one individual tournament or AOI race, when things start to look like they're decided already, something crazy almost always happens. Like
Yeah.
the tournaments where guys have giant leads going into the final day, Wheeler being a prime example of that. Crazy things happen. Like when we as fans and the media or whoever, and just fans of the sport in general, think that something's already predetermined and already set, it seems like there's always some kind of shakeup involved, and I'm sure that in the final 2 elites of the season we will see that. And another thing I wanted to hit on, because you obviously went through quite a bit there when you talked about Robert G. I mean, you're talking about a guy that also, to your point, I want to say at least one of the years that, maybe from his junior to senior year at UT, Tennessee, that is, not Texas, because that's not the real UT. But I'm going to screenshot that and show James Hall because he really likes when people do that. Um, but
Is he one of those ones that they got that banned from NCAA 24? Is they don't have the horns down in the game because Texas fans are soft? I mean, I'm not
there,
surprised, but
there's certainly some truth to that. I think that it's insane that has become such a negative thing and how it's like viewed as if it's just the most
I mean,
disrespectful thing.
throw up your
Um,
gang sign and they would be, you get just as
but
offended, it seems.
but to the point with Robert G, I think 2 years in a row, at least I know 1 year for sure, maybe not his senior year, was left off the prospect list. I mean, and you're
Well,
talking
he's
about
like
a
Louis
guy.
Minetti, though. He fished with multiple people. He fished by himself too. And I just, like I said, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with your game. Like it's okay for us to miss once in a while, but yeah,
Sure.
like
And
I
that's
just was unaware that he was that close in team of the year. I think the year Lewis did win. I think going into the last event, he was like second, and then he had a tough Saginaw or something. He said that to me, and I was like, man, how did I miss that?
and that's I don't know, that's just one of those things where like it goes back to I don't know how many times on this podcast I've preached this, but the skill and the talent in the college ranks, how deep that is. I mean, we make that gallery of predictions, usually, I don't know, somewhere between 20 and 30 anglers or teams, and the fact that we didn't have one that made the Elite Series his first year out of college just speaks to that even more. I mean, it's just insane the amount of talent coming out of the college series, and I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon.
Well, and I think it's also good to say, like we talk about the college fishing and the scholarship schools, those teams that have programs that recruit and get anglers on scholarship. Those are great for the sport. They have great teams. But if we're being completely honest, the first dozen people to make the Elite Series were from schools that didn't offer scholarships. Brandon Card, Kentucky. You've got the Lee brothers, Auburn. You've got UNC Charlottes of the world with LeHue and Whitaker. You've got South Carolina with Walters and Cook with FSU. And you've got some of those schools like that. It's only relatively recently with KJ Queen with Bethel University that they had a school. Montevallo doesn't have an angler in the Elite Series. Like the fact University of Tennessee does. Like there's so many, the Carson Newmans, the Campbellsville of the world. I'm not dogging on them. They just hadn't had, they normally are the representative of the college series winning the bracket, but they don't end up, they haven't made the Elite Series. And Bryan College got theirs with Cole Sands and Jacob Fouts, but that's within the last 3 or 4 years. And so the first 10 years of college fishing, it was those outlier non-scholarship programs that put them out, Atkins from Mississippi State, all those types of things. And so um, that is important to know, is that you can go to a school with a great reputation, you can go to a school that has great funding and opportunity, but there will be people that you least expect, or not that those guys were all that I mentioned I fished against, like we knew that they were very good, but they didn't come from a place where it was like expected. Like they have a reputation of sending people to the elites. It's like these random schools did. And so I think that's worth mentioning, that you know, you don't have to be the prize prospect at the prize school to make the Elite Series. I guess we could call Wesley Gore out now that I'm saying it. Wesley Gore did go to Montevallo for 2 years, um, and then left school to pursue the Opens for a few seasons. So I'll give Montevallo their due. He went there. He did go to classes there. He may not have a bachelor's degree from there, but he does, which, it's taking guys 6, 7 years now because they like college fishing so much. So.
It's like it's basically like, when a guy jumps in the portal and goes to another school and then they get drafted. Well, the team that previously had him is also going to take credit for it as well. So you see that a lot. The whole
Someone
the whole
posted,
Jalen Hurts debate.
oh
Is
yeah,
Jalen Hurts from Alabama or Oklahoma? Well, I don't know. You could argue either, but they're
Jalen
both
Hurts
going to take
doesn't
credit.
Jalen Hurts doesn't get his Oklahoma opportunity if he's not from Alabama. We'll just say that. So that's the way it's the it's the someone doctored up a University of Arkansas, hog basketball photo where it was Team USA's. It was every single Kentucky player on Team USA, and it said like, "We raise them different here," and it was a fake tweet. It wasn't real, but claiming Coach Cal's players as your own, which I did. I do think that I've laughed a couple times that our hogs have done that. So.
Well, they didn't though. That whole tweet, and I'm
No,
defending
that
it
one
because
that one's fake. But before, when they're like, they're speaking to Coach Cal's reputation of sending people to the draft and the stats pot, and you're like, these are all Kentucky players, kind of thing. But yeah, yeah, yeah.
sure, true. But then again, I mean, you can look at it from the standpoint of, if you're looking at it, the school. I don't even know why we're having this conversation on a bass fishing podcast, but you can look at it from the standpoint of Daniel Gafford didn't play under Eric Musselman, but also Daniel Gafford's had a great NBA career
Yes.
and still went to Arkansas. So I mean,
Oh,
whoever the
no
head
doubt,
coach was,
no
and
doubt.
I think the school represents him more than the
Oh,
coach
for
does.
sure.
But again, I'm sure nobody's listening to this podcast to hear you and I sports takes.
Hey, you would be surprised. I will say some gratitude to the folks. I've gotten so many messages saying they listened to the whole thing, or they thought so and so part of it was hilarious. And I'm like, that was an hour and 10 minutes into the podcast. Holy cow, you thought that was funny, which means you watched to the end. Um, Kyle, I think we've been trying to do this to catch us up. We missed basically a week and a half worth of podcast opportunity time because the 4th of July happened last week. You took off Wednesday. You were like, we can do it. And I was like, no, we're not doing it. I've been out of the state traveling. We shot a feature that will air at some point soon with John Cruz, for a Mercury, spotlight on him and his career, and the many facets he's involved at the industry. So that was very cool. We did that earlier this week, traveled back home. I've been taking care of, if you guys know me personally, we've had a car accident in the family. Someone rear-ended, my wife on the road the other day. And so we've had to deal with a new car, and or dealing with how we're going to get a new car. And so that is all finalized. Now we're rolling into an open. So we're getting back to normal. Getting back to
And
normal,
then
except
even between now and then, we've got, well, not between now and then, but even directly after the Open, we've got ICAST coming
I
up as well,
guess.
something that we haven't really discussed at all. But I will pub this a little bit because
Yes.
Ronnie's been a help on this, and and hopefully it goes well. We'll knock on wood here and assume it will. But we'll be doing some different stuff from ICAST this year. A lot of the same types of content we've done in the past with video overload and photo galleries and everything else. But with the help of Ronnie, we're going to do some YouTube live, um, each day of ICAST, walking around the show floor, talking to different anglers, having them show off some of the new products, and should be a lot of fun. So, I mean, if you're still listening and wanting to see some of the new stuff from ICAST, certainly tune in. There's obviously a chat, so we can keep an eye on what people want to look at, and should be really interactive and should be a lot of fun. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Yeah, I kind of am torn. I won't, if it's you and James Hall, I kind of want you behind the camera shooting it to relay the questions, but I also want you in front of the camera to be the one, talking. All love James. I'm just kidding, but because
It'll
I
it'll
know
be a
he
great
would throw
group
you
effort.
under the bus with the questions, no doubt. He's gonna be so and so says this, and they didn't say that. They didn't. He's just throwing Kyle a question. No, but it
I
should be
know
good. And
he'll
then hopefully we do a podcast from iCast as well. If you have 15, 20 minutes to chat with me, maybe we grab an angler, and knock out a podcast episode from iCast, because that is the look in to the industry event that the public doesn't get the opportunity to see. So that'll be a good week for you guys next week, and I will be here, which is great. So I'll be here, not leaving, staying
good
here.
for you, buddy. Good
Yeah.
for you.
Well,
I'm
good for
happy to hear
you.
that.
Love it. Well, hey, Kyle, St. Clair Open going on right now. Tune into Bass Track weigh-ins. I think they're an hour earlier than, I think it's 2 Central for weigh-ins, right? Is that right?
Let me
I
double
think
check
I think
here. Yep, 2 Eastern, so maybe 1 p.m. Central
2
Time.
Eastern. Yeah, 2 Eastern. We normally do Bassmaster Live to 3 Eastern. It's going to 2 Eastern this time to make way for the weigh-in because they start so early. So I got a spam risk phone call. That was loud in my ears. And so it'll be an early start and an early end for these anglers this week at St. Clair. A lot at stake. Also, I'll mention this. We will get into the Champlain preview. We've got a couple weeks before we head up north. We were talking about the spotted bass and largemouth at Smith. Well, we thought largemouth could factor last year for Champlain because the water was higher. That did not come to fruition. It's spread out a lot of largemouth. We'll keep an eye. We'll look back in the records to see what last year's water level was and to see what this year's water level was. If it's a little lower than it was, we could maybe see largemouth return to some anglers' bags at Champlain. So we could have a mixed bag event coming up there as well. We'll keep an eye on it. The smallmouth are getting so big, so I'm not lending that I think it's going to be one that way or whatever. But we do know that do they do contribute. You catch a kicker largemouth, it goes a long way. So, Kyle, I'll see you in the next episode, but appreciate you joining us. I know you got a lot to do. I got to try to, bust it the last day and a half of this week before we do live. So I will see you next week from remote from iCast.